No one expected the bride to cry. The great hall of the Jiruan Empire was built to show power. Its ceiling was made of living crystal that glowed like frozen lightning. Massive banners floated in the air, each one showing the symbol of conquest. Music echoed through the hall, deep and heavy. Played on instruments, made from bone and metal. This was not a place for sadness. This was a place for victory. Princess Celira stood at the center of the hall, dressed in ceremonial silk the color of a dying star. The fabric was beautiful, but it felt heavy on her body, like it was pressing her into the floor. A golden collar rested around her neck, cold against her skin. It was not jewelry. It was a symbol that she did not lift her head. Her people stood far behind her, silent and defeated. Their faces showed no anger, now only fear. They had already lost the war. This marriage was the final payment. Across from her stood Warlord Korath. He was massive, his armored body scarred by countless battles. His 4 red eyes glowed with calm confidence. Even on his wedding day, he carried weapons. His claws rested easily at his sides, like he might kill someone out of habit. Korath had destroyed entire worlds, and now he was being rewarded with a bride. Celira's hands shook as she held them together. She tried to breathe slowly, the way her mother once taught her when fear became too heavy. But it did not work. Her chest felt tight, like the air itself refused to help her. A tear slipped from her eye, then another. They fell silently onto the floor. No one reacted. The nobles watched with bored expressions. To them, this was not cruelty. It was tradition. Peace through ownership. Silence through fear. The priest began to speak, reciting ancient words that bound. Lives and erased choice. Celira barely heard them. All she could think was that this was the end. Not of her life, but of herself. At the far edge of the hall stood someone who did not belong. Elias. Ward was human. He wore a simple diplomatic uniform, plain and slightly too small. Humans were new to the galaxy, and not many species took them seriously. They were physically weak compared to others. Their technology was average. Their influence was small. Elias was not important. He was only there to translate minor details of the ceremony for human records. But Elias was watching the bride. He noticed how her shoulders were shaking, how her breathing was uneven, how her eyes never once looked at the warlord she was supposed to marry. He frowned. Something about this felt wrong. Elias had seen political marriages before. Humans had done it in their own history. But this was different. This was not sadness mixed with duty. This was fear, real fear. Celira's tears continued to fall. She tried to stop them, ashamed, but they came faster. Each breath felt like it might break her in half. Elias felt his chest tighten. He did not understand her language fully without his translator. But he understood crying. Humans were good at that. The priest raised his voice. The vows were reaching their final stage. Once spoken, the bond would be permanent, unbreakable. Celira's vision blurred. Her legs felt weak. Inside her mind, a single thought repeated again and again. Please, someone, anyone. Elias took one step forward. A guard noticed instantly. A weapon shifted slightly in his direction. Elias stopped, but he did not step back. He looked at Celira's face one more time. Her tears were not quiet anymore. They shook her whole body, and in that moment, Elias realized something that no one else in the hall seemed to understand. Her tears were not asking for mercy. They were screaming for help. And once a human hears a scream like that, it is very hard to ignore. The hall was silent, except for the soft crackle of the floating lights. Celira's tears kept falling, tracing glowing streaks on the ceremonial silk of her gown. Every time she tried to lift her head, her strength failed her. Her lips trembled, but she could not speak. The ancient words of the priest filled the air, binding her life to Koroth's. Each syllable felt like chains, tightening around her heart, that the nobles looked on as if they were watching a show. To them, this was a victory, a spectacle of control. They did not see her fear. They did not see the way her hands shook. They did not hear the sound of desperation hidden in the soft gasp of each breath. Except one human. Elias Ward stood at the far edge of the hall, his eyes locked on her. He was small in the face of the giants around him, but his attention was unwavering. He did not look at the Warlord. He did not look at the golden banners or the crystal lights. He only looked at the bride who was slowly disappearing behind her tears. Something inside Elias told him that the human technology, the translators, the screens, none of it could capture what he was sensing. This was not a language of words. This was a language of pain, fear, silent screaming. Celira was screaming, and her voice traveled through the air. Not in sounds humans could normally hear, but in the rhythm of her sobs, the sharp catch in her breathing, the tension in her trembling hands. Elias swallowed. The hall felt too large. The music felt too loud. And yet, her cries, quiet as they were louder than everything else. He took a step forward. Instantly, a guard's weapon shifted toward him. Their claws gleamed, ready to strike. Another guard blocked his path. His chest tightened with fear, not for himself, but for her. He could not just stand by. Humans might be weak, but humans were stubborn when someone's life hung in the balance. He spoke, his voice shaking but firm. "Is she allowed to refuse?" The hall erupted in laughter. A ripple of mockery ran through the nobles. Koroth's 4 red eyes fixed on him. One blink. One slow step toward him. "Human," the warlord's voice rolled like distant thunder. "Do you not know your place? Consent is irrelevant. She is property now." Celira flinched at the word, property. She had been called many things in her life, but never with such certainty, never with such finality. Every word was a chain. Every gaze a cage. She wanted to run. She wanted to vanish. But she could not. Elias clenched his fists. He stepped closer, ignoring the weapon pointed at him. "You think this is law? This is cruelty." His voice rang through the hall. The crystal ceiling vibrated slightly as if responding to his anger. "You cannot force someone to marry someone who terrifies them. Not ever." The nobles murmured. Some gasped. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The priest faltered, unsure how to continue the ceremony. For the first time, silence took hold. Celira lifted her head just a fraction. Her eyes, wide and shining with tears, found Elias's. In that glance, he understood everything. She had been trapped for months, maybe years. She had cried in private, hoping someone would notice, hoping someone would save her. And now she had been seen. Elias took another step. "If you do not want this," he said softly, leaning just slightly closer, "say it." The hall froze. Koroth's hands twitched, and the noble stared as if he had lost control of the ceremony entirely. Celira's lips parted, barely audible. "I do not consent." The words were so soft, so fragile, they could have been lost in the wind. But Elias heard them. And more importantly, he understood the storm behind them, the terror, the pain, the pleading. The guards shifted, unsure what to do. Koroth roared, a sound like fire against stone. "Kill him. Kill the human." Elias did not flinch. He raised a small device strapped to his wrist, a human distress beacon. A soft blue light blinked, and in an instant, a signal traveled across space. Not a call for war, not a demand. Just a broadcast. Just a scream to the galaxy, "Help her." Celira's eyes widened. She did not know what he had done, but the moment felt different. For the first time, the chains around her heart seemed a little looser. Someone had heard. Someone had finally listened. Elias looked at her and whispered, almost to himself, "You are not alone." And for the first time since this nightmare began, she believed it. The hall erupted in chaos. Korith's roar shook the crystal ceiling, making it hum like a living thing. His 4 red eyes burned with rage as he pointed at Elias. "Human!" he bellowed. "Do you dare challenge the Jiruan Empire? Do you dare interfere in what is mine by law and by right?" Elias did not flinch. He stood his ground, feeling the weight of dozens of armored guards surrounding him. He could feel their claws, their energy weapons, their desire to make him disappear. Yet he kept his eyes on Celira. Every breath she took was shallow, every tear a silent scream he could feel in his bones. "You cannot do this," Elias said, his voice trembling but stronger than he knew. "You cannot take someone's life and call it law. You cannot take someone's freedom and call it tradition. She is terrified. She does not consent. She is not yours." The nobles laughed. Some of them clutched their arms, whispering to one another. They had never seen a human speak like this. Weak? Maybe. Insignificant? Definitely. But bold? Dangerous. Terrifying. The kind of fear that could spread like fire. Korith stepped closer, each movement deliberate, every step causing the floor to tremble. "You speak for her? You dare tell me how to live? She is my bride, and nothing will change that." Celira's breath caught. Her hands gripped the silk of her gown so tightly that her fingers went white. She wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but her body refused. She had been trained to obey, to hide, to be silent. Until now. Elias looked at her again, his voice softening just enough for her to hear. "Say it. Tell them. Tell him. Say that you do not want this." She shook her head at first. The words seemed impossible, heavy like mountains on her tongue. Her lips trembled. Her eyes, wide and shining with tears, flickered between hope and fear. Could she really defy a warlord? Could she risk her life? Then, something in her chest broke. The fear that had lived there for so long began to burn away, replaced by something small but powerful, courage. "I do not consent," she whispered, voice barely audible, but enough to cut through the tension in the room. The hall froze. Guards stopped mid-step. Nobles' mouths opened, then closed, unsure what to do. Even the priest faltered, his chant breaking into silence. Korith's roar shook the entire hall. "Kill him! Kill her! Do not let anyone hear this nonsense." Guards moved forward, weapons raised. Elias didn't back down. He raised his wrist, activating the small human device strapped there. A soft blue light blinked. And then, the signal went out across the galaxy. It was not a call for war. It was not a request for help. It was a broadcast. A single, undeniable message. This woman is in danger. She is being forced. Stop this. Celira's eyes widened as she saw the light. She did not know what Elias had done, but something in her chest stirred. Hope. Real hope. For the first time in months, maybe years, someone had seen her. Someone had heard her scream, even if it was silent. The first human ship appeared in orbit above the hall. Its arrival was slow, deliberate, and it radiated authority. The nobles whispered. The guards shifted nervously. Korith's eyes narrowed, but he did not stop. He had not learned fear. Not yet. Elias stepped closer to Celira, ignoring the weapons trained on him. "You are not alone," he whispered again. "No one can make you theirs if you do not want it." Her tears fell faster now, but they were different. Not only fear, but relief. Not only despair, but the faintest trace of strength. She realized that the world was not entirely against her. That someone, even a small, weak human, was willing to risk everything to save her. And that realization, as simple as it seemed, shook the foundations of the hall more than Korath's roar ever could, because in that moment, the Warlord realized something too: rules, tradition, and fear could not bind every life. Some lives were bigger than law. Some cries could not be ignored. And humans could hear what no one else would. The first human ships arrived like shadows, cutting across the glowing sky of the Jiruan Empire. They did not blaze like a parade of fire. They did not roar with weapons. They were calm, disciplined, and purposeful. Every alien in the hall could feel the shift. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with expectation. Elias Ward did not look at the ships. He looked at Celira. Her shoulders shook as she clutched the heavy ceremonial silk around her chest. Each tear had left a mark, glowing faintly in the light of the crystal ceiling. Her fear was not gone. It would never leave entirely. But it had become something else now, something dangerous to those who thought they could control her. The nobles whispered among themselves. No human had ever acted like this before. No human had ever dared to interrupt a royal ceremony in the Jiruan Empire. To them, humans were weak, fragile, and insignificant. But here they were, silent, steady, unstoppable. Korath's red eyes glowed brighter. His roar shook the crystal once more. "You dare summon weapons against me? You dare threaten the Empire with your puny species?" Elias stood tall. His voice rang out, steady, carrying more weight than anyone thought it could. "I do not threaten the Empire. I demand one thing: you release her. She is not yours. She never will be. And if you do not step back, humans will intervene." The Warlord laughed, deep and cruel, a sound that made the crystal ceiling tremble. "Humans? What can your weak fleets do against me? Do you not know who I am? Do you not know what I have conquered?" At that moment, a calm voice echoed through the hall. It was not loud, but it carried through every crystal and every floating platform. "This is Captain Reyes of the United Earth Navy. Step away from the bride." The words were simple, direct, full of authority, and they were terrifying. Korath's 4 eyes narrowed. He did not recognize authority like this. No empire had ever spoken to him in such a way. "You will not command me, human. I am law." "No," the captain replied calmly. "You are not law. You are a tyrant. And tyrants do not survive when humans hear a scream they cannot ignore." The first human Marines appeared inside the hall. Not shouting, not firing. They did not move aggressively. They moved as if they owned the space, forming a line between Celira and Korath. Their weapons were ready, but their stance was defensive, protective. Celira's eyes widened. For months, maybe years, she had believed herself alone. Invisible, forgotten. And yet, here they were. Humans, weak, fragile, strange beings by all accounts, had arrived to protect her. Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but the words got caught in her throat. Fear had almost silenced her forever. Now something else took its place. Hope. Elias stepped closer to her. "You are safe," he whispered. "For now. But you must speak. You must stand. They cannot help you if you do not show them who you are." Korath's roar shook the floor. His army of guards hesitated, unsure. He was used to fear, obedience, unquestioned submission. He was not used to a bride who had someone else on her side. He was not used to humans who refused to back down. The nobles grew restless. They began to whisper, some nervously. If humans acted like this, could the Empire still control them? Could they control anyone? The crystal ceiling trembled as Korath's fury grew. His hands clenched into claws. "Kill them. Kill the human. Kill her if you must." But the humans did not retreat. They had seen enough suffering to know the cost of silence. They had heard the scream hidden in Celira's tears, and humans did not forget. Humans did not ignore cries for help, and now, the warlord realized he was no longer facing a lone bride. He was facing an entire species willing to act, willing to intervene, willing to stop him. Celira's tears continued to fall, but this time, they were different. Not just fear, not just pain, relief, strength, hope, the knowledge that someone, anyone, had seen her, and that meant the impossible could happen. Elias took her hand gently. "You are not alone anymore. Do you understand? They are here for you. Humans will not let them hurt you." And in that moment, the Jeruan Empire learned something it had never known. Fear was not universal. Strength did not always come from weapons. Courage could arrive in the smallest, weakest form. Sometimes it came in humans who simply refused to ignore a scream. Koreth's lips curled, but even he felt it, the shift. The power he thought he held was slipping. And all because one human had heard what her tears were screaming. The hall had changed completely. What was once a place of celebration and triumph for Koreth had become a chamber of tension and fear, his fear, not theirs. The Zaruan nobles shifted uneasily on their floating platforms, whispering to each other in hurried, terrified tones. For the first time, the mighty warlord realized that power could be fragile, that even the largest, strongest, and most feared could be shaken by the courage of the small and unexpected. Elias Ward stood beside Celira, his hand lightly resting on hers. He did not need to speak to comfort her. Just being there, human, defiant, unafraid, gave her the strength she had thought lost forever. Her eyes, still shining with tears, were no longer only full of fear. They were beginning to hold fire. A fire she had buried deep inside her heart. Koreth's 4 red eyes darted between the humans and Celira. Rage rolled off him like smoke, but it was clear now that he could not move freely. The humans had positioned themselves carefully, blocking every exit, every angle. Even his guards, loyal to him for decades, hesitated, uncertain what to do, against beings who had no fear and acted with unwavering discipline. The first step of human intervention was not violence. It was law. The UN fleet's legal team, experts in galactic rights, had already transmitted the evidence of Koreth's crimes across the network. Forced marriages, massacres, destruction of innocent worlds, centuries of cruelty, all presented with precision and clarity. Koreth bellowed, but no one moved. Humans did not flinch at roars, at threats, at the terror that had kept empires in line for centuries. They stood firm, silent in their authority, and watched the warlord crumble under the weight of what they revealed. Celira stepped forward, her voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. "For too long, we have been treated like objects, like property, like trophies. We were punished for our choices. We were silenced. We were terrified to speak. But no more. I will not be forced. I will not be claimed. I will not hide behind obedience to protect others from your wrath. I am a person, and I am free." The words echoed in the hall. They cut through the crystal ceiling, through the banners, and into the hearts of all who listened. Nobles gasped. Guards froze. Even Koreth's claws trembled as he realized the truth. Words could not be controlled like weapons. Courage could not be caged out. Elias squeezed her hand gently. "See," he whispered. "You have already begun to win." The tribunal that followed was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The human witnesses, the intercepted communications, the recorded cries of pain from countless victims, all undeniable. Koreth had ruled through fear, and the humans made sure everyone saw the cost of that fear. The warlord raged, throwing his arms, roaring, trying to intimidate. But the humans did not respond with anger. They responded with law, with discipline, with morality, with courage. The judgment came down as clear as sunlight. Koreth would be stripped of his rank. His territories would be redistributed. He would be imprisoned for life. His empire would survive, but he would not. And most importantly, no one could ever claim Celira against her will again, as Korath was led away in chains. He glared at her with all the hatred of someone who had lost control of everything he believed he owned. Celira did not flinch. She met his gaze, calm, steady, and free. In that moment, she realized something more important than victory or safety. She had found her voice. And nothing, not fear, not tradition, not even warlords could take it from her again. The nobles, who had once mocked her, now looked at her with awe. The humans had done more than protect a bride. They had taught the galaxy something new. Courage and compassion were as powerful as armies. Strength did not always come from weapons. Sometimes it came from standing for what is right, and listening when no one else will. Celira turned to Elias, her silver eyes glimmering. "Thank you," she whispered. "You heard what no one else could hear." Elias shook his head. "I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I only stood beside you." And in that moment, the two of them knew something that no weapon could ever teach. Freedom begins with being seen. Courage begins with being heard, and hope. Hope begins with the belief that someone, somewhere, will not look away when you are in pain. The hall, once a place of chains and fear, now echoed with the quiet power of justice. And for Celira, it was the first time she could truly breathe. For the first time in what felt like forever, Celira could stand without fear. The chains of tradition, the weight of war, the shadow of Korath, they were gone, at least for now. The hall was quiet, the nobles still whispering, still stunned by the turn of events. But Celira did not look at them. She did not need their approval. She only looked at the sky through the crystal ceiling and felt something new stir. Inside her, freedom. Elias Ward stayed by her side, quietly, letting her take the first steps back into her life. She had survived the impossible, and now every breath felt lighter, every movement more certain. She began to notice the world again, the way the crystal ceiling glimmered, the soft hum of floating platforms, the distant glow of alien cities outside the hall. Colors felt brighter. Sounds felt sharper. Even the faint breeze that came through the high windows seemed to carry a promise. Her first act was small, but it mattered. She walked to the pedestal where her ceremonial items had been displayed, the crown, the silk, the golden collar. She touched each one briefly, feeling the history, the fear, the oppression they represented. Then she let them fall. They clattered to the floor, heavy and meaningless. She did not need them. She did not need their weight on her shoulders. Elias watched her quietly. "You're stronger than anyone imagined," he said softly. She shook her head. "No," she replied, her voice still soft but firm. "I am just learning to be myself. For the first time, I am allowed to breathe. That is strength enough for now." Word of her courage spread quickly. Across the galaxy, broadcasts of the ceremony and the human intervention reached planets that had never thought about justice, about rights, about freedom. People saw a princess refuse a tyrant, a human stand against a warlord, and it changed the way they thought. Systems that had bowed to fear began to question their leaders. Others began to speak for themselves. One act of bravery became many. Celira realized something else, something she had never believed before. She could be a leader without fear. She could be more than a pawn in someone else's war. She could protect her people, teach them courage, and build a future where fear no longer ruled. Elias stayed with her during the early days, helping her navigate the complexities of diplomacy, law, and rebuilding trust. He never treated her as weak, never spoke down to her. He simply listened, guided, and sometimes reminded her that it was okay to feel afraid, as long as she did not stay silent. One evening, after the hall had emptied and the crystal lights dimmed to a soft glow, Celira and Elias stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The alien skyline stretched endlessly, but it felt smaller now, no longer a prison, but a world of possibilities. "You heard me," she said quietly, looking up at him. "You heard what my tears were screaming. No one else did. No one else cared." Elias smiled faintly. "I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I only helped the world notice. Humans. We don't ignore cries for help. And you were screaming, but now you are singing." Salira's lips curved into a small smile. She had not smiled like this in months, maybe years. The kind of smile that comes from realizing your life is finally your own. The next weeks were filled with small victories. Salira rewrote laws about forced marriages and personal freedom. She visited the wounded, the frightened, and those who had suffered under Korith's rule. Every time she saw someone regain hope, she felt her own strength grow. She realized that courage was contagious, that one brave act could inspire millions. And in quiet moments, when she allowed herself to be human again, she thought of Elias, not as a hero, but as a witness. Someone who believed in her when no one else would. Someone who had reminded her that even in the darkest moments, someone could hear you, truly hear you, and that could change everything. Salira's life was not perfect. She still had fear, still had pain. But she had learned the most important lesson of all. She was no longer alone. And freedom, once tasted, could never be taken away. She finally breathed fully, deeply, without apology. And in that breath, she felt the first real spark of hope in her life. The kind of hope that could light entire worlds. Years later, the hall that had once held fear and chains was unrecognizable. The crystal ceiling still glimmered, the banners still floated, but the atmosphere was different. Laughter, music, and quiet conversation filled the space. No longer was it a place of fear. It had become a place of justice, learning, and remembrance. At the center of the hall stood a statue. Not of Korith, not of the nobles who had once ruled through terror. It was a simple human hand, open and reaching forward. Its bronze surface caught the light, glowing softly as though it held warmth. The plaque beneath it read, "They thought her tears were weakness." A human heard a scream. Salira stood before it, her silver eyes shining. She was no longer the trembling bride who had once been forced to marry a warlord. She was a leader, a survivor, and a symbol. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and her shoulders themselves were strong and unafraid. Around her, people from countless worlds watched her with respect, not fear. Elias stood quietly behind her. Older now, a little grayer, but still the same steady presence. He did not seek praise. He did not need it. He had only done what humans did best, listen. And sometimes, listening was stronger than any weapon. Salira turned to him, her lips curving into a soft, genuine smile. "You heard me," she said, her voice filled with calm certainty. "When no one else did. You listened when I had no words left, only tears." Elias shook his head. "I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just helped the world notice." She reached for his hand and held it lightly. "No, you reminded me that someone could hear me, that my pain mattered. That is why I survived. That is why I could fight back." Across the galaxy, the story of Salira's courage and the human intervention had spread like wildfire. Tyrants and warlords whispered in fear. Diplomats and leaders, once cruel and rigid, began to think differently. Entire systems began to change, realizing that consent, compassion, and courage were forces even they could not ignore. Salira's people rebuilt their world. Children played without fear. Families reunited. Cities that had been destroyed under Korith's reign grew taller, brighter, stronger than before. And in every corner, the story of the princess and the human who heard her tears became a lesson, a symbol, and a legend. She often thought of that first day in the Great Hall, when fear had seemed endless. when every breath had felt like chains, when her voice had been silenced by the weight of a warlord's power. She remembered the exact moment she whispered, "I do not consent," and the courage that flowed through her like fire. She remembered Elias, small and human, standing against impossible odds, and she realized how much difference one willing heart could make. The statue was more than a monument. It was a reminder, to the weak, that courage is possible. To the strong, that cruelty can be challenged. To the entire galaxy, that humans, even fragile, knew. Insignificant humans could see what others ignored and act when it mattered most. Salira lifted her head to the ceiling, breathing fully for the first time in years. Every inhale was a victory, every exhale a promise. Her tears had once been a plea, a silent scream in the dark. Now they had become something else. They had become change. They had become hope. They had become the reason the galaxy learned to listen. She turned to Elias one last time. "The world listens now. Because someone listened to me when it mattered." Elias smiled faintly. "Humans do that. We don't ignore cries for help. And you showed the galaxy what freedom really looks like." The hall was quiet for a moment, filled with the soft hum of the crystal and the faint echo of lives changed forever. And in that quiet, Salira felt it. Not